The fallen millionaire and the street genius. Everyone laughed when a bankrupt millionaire adopted a street girl who worked just to eat. He was shocked when he realized she was a genius. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from, I'd love to know. The 52nd floor had once seemed like the top of the world to Michael Thompson. Now, as he gazed at the New York skyline through the window of his modest apartment, it felt like a cruel reminder of how far he had fallen. The twinkling lights of the financial district buildings, one of which had once borne his name, now mocked him with their distant glow. Michael swirled the amber liquid in his crystal glass, the last from his collection of fine whiskies. Everything else had vanished. The mansions, the cars, the yacht, the respect, all had evaporated in 6 devastating weeks when Victor Harrison, his partner of 3 decades and supposedly his best friend, had orchestrated the most elegant financial betrayal in recent memory. 2 empire builders, Michael whispered bitterly to the empty room, raising his glass in a mocking toast before taking a deep gulp, welcoming the familiar burn. The doctor's words from that morning echoed in his mind. Your blood pressure is dangerously high, Mr. Thompson. The stress is killing you. Michael laughed without humor. Of course it was. Watching 30 years of work dissolve overnight would stress anyone to the breaking point. The nightmares had been relentless. Standing in the boardroom as stocks plummeted, watching helplessly as Harrison transferred billions to offshore accounts, the pitying looks from former employees as security escorted him from the building. Michael Thompson, the financial genius who had built Thompson Financial Group from nothing, reduced to a cautionary tale. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass, his reflection revealing a man he barely recognized. At 58, his once commanding presence had withered. Deep lines carved paths from his eyes to his jaw. His tailored suits hung in the closet, replaced by a worn sweater and pants that better suited his new circumstances. What legacy did I really leave? He asked himself, his voice breaking in the silence of his apartment. Numbers on a screen, buildings with my name that will be renamed within a year. What was it all for? The distant wail of a siren drew his attention to the streets below, where tiny figures hurried through the season's first snow, real people with real lives, while he had lived in abstractions, market projections, asset valuations, risk assessments. He had been so certain of his impact on the world. Michael drained the last of his whiskey, set the empty glass aside, and made a decision. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow he would leave these walls that had become both refuge and prison. Tomorrow he would remember what it meant to live in the real world again, not in the rarefied air where fortunes were made and lost with keystrokes. Michael Thompson little knew that tomorrow would change everything in ways he could never have calculated. Morning greeted New York with a relentless rain that turned the city streets into rushing rivers of gray. Michael pulled his worn coat tighter as he walked aimlessly, letting the rain mask the tears he had denied himself. For weeks, his doctor would be pleased. At least he was outside. He almost missed her, a small figure huddled under the awning of what had once been a bookstore. The child couldn't have been more than 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on a piece of cardboard that did little to protect her from the damp cold. Before her lay an array of delicate paper creations, origami animals made with surprising complexity. Michael would have kept walking like all the others hurrying past if the girl hadn't looked up at that precise moment. Their eyes met, and he froze. Hers was surprisingly alert, possessing a depth that seemed impossible in someone so young, intelligent, cautious, and impossibly old. "Would you like to buy one, sir?" Her voice was clear and steady. No trace of the pleading whine that street vendors often affected. They cost $1 each, but they'll last forever if you keep them dry. Michael found himself kneeling to examine her work. "You made these yourself?" "Yes, sir. The swan is the hardest, but the fox is my favorite." He picked up a small paper fox, marveling at the precision of its folds. "My name is Michael. What's yours?" "Emma," she replied, her small fingers arranging her wares with professional efficiency. "Where are your parents, Emma?" The girl's hands paused momentarily. "My grandmother is in the hospital. I'm taking care of things until she gets better." Michael noticed two men across the street watching them with disturbing interest. Something protective stirred within him, an unfamiliar sensation after years of corporate detachment. "How much for your entire stock?" he asked suddenly. Emma's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with childlike calculation. $23. I have 23 pieces today. He reached for his wallet, finding two $20 bills. "Keep the change. You must be hungry. Would you like to get something to eat?" Her hesitation lasted only seconds before she nodded, gathering her few belongings into a worn backpack with practiced movements. They walked to a nearby diner, and Michael watched in silent concern as Emma devoured a sandwich like she wasn't sure when she might eat again. As she ate, she absent-mindedly scribbled on a napkin. Looking over, Michael was surprised to see not childish doodles, but complex mathematical equations, formulations that even with his financial background he could barely comprehend. "What are you working on there?" he asked casually. Emma quickly covered the napkin with her hand. "Just numbers. They help me think." In that moment, looking at this small girl with extraordinary abilities living on the edge of survival, something shifted in Michael Thompson's broken heart. The world had more to offer than his self-pity, and perhaps, just perhaps, he had more to offer the world than he had believed. As evening approached, Michael faced a dilemma he never expected. The rain had intensified, and Emma had no safe place to go. "I have a spare room," he found himself saying, surprising himself as much as the girl. "It's just my office, but there's a couch that converts to a bed." Emma studied him with those disturbingly perceptive eyes. "Why would you help me? Most people just walk by." A fair question, one Michael wasn't sure he could answer completely. "Maybe because I know what it's like when the world walks by you." That night he improvised a bedroom in his home office, clearing financial documents from the sofa bed. Emma fell asleep almost instantly, clutching her backpack as if it might disappear. Michael stood in the doorway, watching the steady rise and fall of her small chest, overwhelmed by the strange turn his life had taken. The next morning, he called Rebecca Collins, a social worker who had frequently criticized his company's cold corporate policies during community board meetings. She arrived skeptical, but softened when she met Emma. "You understand this is highly irregular," Rebecca said, as they spoke in low tones in the kitchen. "I should place her in emergency care immediately." "She needs stability," Michael argued. "Her grandmother is in the hospital. This could be temporary." Rebecca's eyebrows rose. Michael Thompson, arguing for compassion over procedure? I never thought I'd see the day. When she interviewed Emma alone, the girl was frank about her situation. Her grandmother had suffered a stroke 3 weeks ago. With no other family, Emma had survived on her own rather than risk foster care. "She's extraordinary," Rebecca admitted afterward, "but the system has protocols." "The system failed her," Michael countered. "I'm requesting temporary guardianship while we locate her grandmother and assess the situation." 2 days later, they appeared before family court Judge Williams, a man Michael recognized from charity functions in his previous life. The judge's surprise at seeing the former financial titan in his courtroom was evident. "Mr. Thompson, you're requesting temporary guardianship of a minor with whom you have no prior relationship?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And what qualifies you for this responsibility?" "Your recent circumstances are well documented." Michael felt Emma's small hand slip into his. The gesture, so simple and trusting, crystallized something within him. "Your Honor, I'd like to amend my petition," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "I'm seeking to adopt Emma permanently." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Rebecca's clipboard clattered to the floor. Judge Williams leaned forward, genuine confusion crossing his features. "Mr. Thompson, this is highly irregular. What could a man who lost everything possibly offer this child?" Michael looked down at Emma, then back at the judge. "A second chance, Your Honor, for both of us." When they left the courthouse with temporary approval pending home studies and background checks, Emma looked up at him. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Michael replied, suddenly both terrified and exhilarated by the path he had chosen. "But sometimes the decisions we don't plan are the ones that save us." The first weeks of their unlikely arrangement tested both Michael and Emma in ways neither had anticipated. For a man accustomed to managing teams of financial analysts and having meals prepared by private chefs, the mundane challenges of parenthood proved humbling. "What exactly constitutes a balanced breakfast?" Michael muttered one morning, staring helplessly at his nearly empty refrigerator. Emma appeared silently at his side, gently taking the carton of eggs from his hands. "I can make scrambled eggs," she offered. "Grandma taught me before she got sick." Michael watched as this tiny child confidently cracked eggs into a bowl, her movements precise and practiced. His chest tightened with a mixture of admiration and sadness. "You shouldn't have to cook for yourself," he said softly. "That's my job now," Emma shrugged. "We all do what we need to do." The wisdom in her words, far beyond her 8 years, struck him deeply. That afternoon, he enrolled in a basic cooking class and arranged for groceries to be delivered weekly. School presented another challenge. After assessment tests that left administrators wide-eyed, Emma was placed 2 grades ahead, but still seemed bored with the curriculum. When the phone rang during Michael's first attempt at making lasagna, he was greeted by a stern voice. "Mr. Thompson, this is Mrs. Patterson, Emma's math teacher. We need to discuss your daughter's behavior immediately." Michael felt a flash of protective anger he didn't know he was capable of. "What seems to be the problem?" "She publicly corrected my solutions during class and suggested an entirely different approach to solving the equations. It was quite disruptive." That evening, after a tense parent-teacher conference, Michael sat with Emma on the living room floor, surrounded by her math books. "You can't just tell teachers they're wrong, Emma." She looked down, fingers tracing patterns on the carpet. But the method she was teaching would take 14 additional steps for complex problems. "I showed a more efficient way." Michael examined her workbook, finding her method not only correct, but elegant in its simplicity. "You're right," he admitted. "But sometimes being right isn't enough. We need to find a better way for you to share your ideas." Nights brought their own difficulties. Michael would wake to heartbreaking screams echoing through the apartment, finding Emma tangled in sheets, fighting invisible demons. The first time, he froze in the doorway, completely unprepared. By the third night, he had learned to sit quietly beside her bed, his presence gradually calming her back to sleep. One morning, while changing sheets, he discovered small hoards of food hidden under her mattress. Crackers, granola bars, apples carefully wrapped and preserved. "I won't let you go hungry," he promised when he gently confronted her about the stashes. "There will always be food here." Emma nodded, but the next week he found new hiding places in different locations. Trust, he realized, couldn't be built with mere words. The apartment slowly transformed. Michael cleared investment magazines from the shelves to make room for children's literature and advanced mathematics texts. A corner of the living room became dedicated to art supplies for Emma's origami. The refrigerator door, once pristinely bare, now displayed school papers marked with bright red A's. 6 weeks into their new life, Michael received another call from the school. This time it was the principal. "Mr. Thompson, we need to discuss Emma's placement. Our educational psychologist has evaluated her work, and well, frankly, we've never seen anyone with her mathematical abilities." That afternoon, surrounded by educators and specialists, Michael listened as they explained what he had already begun to suspect. "She doesn't just understand mathematics," explained Dr. Harrison, pushing his glasses up his nose. "She sees patterns and connections that most mathematicians spend lifetimes trying to comprehend. She's not being difficult when she corrects her teachers. She simply sees more efficient paths that others miss." On the ride home, Emma sat quietly in the back seat, her small legs swinging nervously. "Am I in trouble?" she finally asked. Michael caught her in the rear-view mirror. "No, Emma, you're extraordinary. We just need to figure out the right way to nurture that brilliance." That night, after tucking her into bed, Michael leaned against her closed door, overwhelmed by the responsibility he had taken on. He had once managed billions of dollars and thousands of employees. Yet nothing had prepared him to guide this remarkable child whose mind operated on a different plane. It was no longer just about providing food and shelter. It was about creating a home where a genius could grow safely. The invitation arrived on heavy letterhead, an unexpected ghost from Michael's former life. The Chicago Financial Foundation was hosting its annual charity gala, an event he had once chaired. In smaller handwriting at the bottom, "Michael, it would mean a lot to see you there, Margaret." Margaret Chen had been one of the few board members who had stood by him, albeit quietly, during his downfall. The gesture touched him more than expected. "We've been invited to a fancy dinner," he told Emma over their breakfast of slightly burned pancakes. She looked up, maple syrup dripping from her fork. I'm not leaving you with a babysitter. You're my daughter now." The word still felt new on his tongue, but increasingly certain. "Besides, it's time we ventured back into society together." That Saturday, Michael dusted off his last remaining tailored suit while Emma twirled in a new navy blue dress they had bought for the occasion. When their taxi approached the glittering downtown hotel, he felt Emma's small hand slip into his. "Are you nervous?" she asked, her perception eerie as always. Michael managed a small smile. "Terrified." "Me too," she confessed. "But we have each other now." The ballroom fell into muffled silence when they entered. Michael Thompson, once king of this world, now returning as a dethroned monarch with a street child at his side. Whispers followed them like shadows as Margaret approached, embracing Michael warmly. "I'm so glad you came," she said before kneeling to Emma's level. "And this must be the remarkable young lady I've heard about." Dinner proceeded awkwardly but tolerably until a familiar voice cut through the soft buzz of conversation. "Well, if it isn't the great Michael Thompson gracing us with his presence." Victor Harrison stood at their table, champagne flute in hand, his smile sharp as broken glass. Though only 3 years younger than Michael, Harrison looked a decade younger, success having preserved rather than aged him. "Victor," Michael acknowledged, his hand instinctively moving to Emma's shoulder. "Charity work your new business now, Thompson?" Harrison's eyes flicked disdainfully to Emma. "Collecting strays?" Michael felt his blood pressure spike dangerously. But before he could respond, the conversation around them shifted to a technical discussion of a new financial algorithm Harrison's company was launching. "Our risk assessment model projects market vulnerabilities with 87% accuracy," Harrison boasted to the table. "Revolutionary in predicting crashes." "Your variable is wrong," came Emma's clear voice from beside Michael. The table went silent. Harrison's smile froze. "Excuse me? Your risk variable," Emma continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "It's underestimated by at least 40%. Your formula doesn't account for compound factors in prolonged bear markets." Harrison's laugh was brittle. "Well, isn't that adorable? Thompson, are you teaching finance to street orphans now?" Several diners laughed nervously, but Walter Stevens, a veteran hedge fund manager, leaned forward with interest. "Actually, how did you reach that conclusion, young lady?" Emma reached for a napkin, borrowed a pen, and quickly sketched a series of equations. Stevens studied them, his thick eyebrows rising steadily. "Remarkable," he murmured. "She's right, Victor. Your model doesn't account for these variables." Harrison's face turned crimson. "This is absurd. I won't be lectured by a child." As he stormed away angrily, Emma's eyes remained fixed on the digital display where Harrison's presentation still glowed. "Mr. Thompson," she whispered, "there's something strange about those numbers." Later, when Michael tucked an exhausted Emma into bed, he found himself torn between pride and concern. "You were brilliant tonight," he told her. "He wasn't a nice man," Emma observed sleepily, "and his math was sloppy. But there was something else in those projections, something hidden." As she drifted off to sleep, Michael remained sitting beside her bed, troubled by the evening's events. Victor Harrison was not a man who forgot or forgave humiliation, By defending Emma, Michael had potentially made a powerful enemy even more dangerous. Yet for the first time since his downfall, he had felt something long dormant stirring within him. Not just the protective instinct toward Emma, but a spark of his old analytical fire. There had indeed been something off about Harrison's presentation, something that didn't quite fit, and no one noticed patterns better than Emma. "This wall should definitely be blue," Emma declared, tapping her chin thoughtfully as she surveyed Michael's home office. "Blue stimulates the brain." 3 months into their life together, Michael had finally agreed to Emma's persistent request to transform the apartment. For too long, it had remained a mausoleum of his former life. The impersonal, rigid decor of a man whose existence had revolved around boardrooms and balance sheets. "Blue it is," Michael agreed, rolling up the sleeves of his old Harvard sweatshirt. "What about your room?" "Yellow," she replied without hesitation. "Like sunshine." The weekend became a whirlwind of paint cans, drop cloths, and furniture rearrangement. Michael dismantled his imposing mahogany desk, the last relic of his corporate throne. In its place, they assembled a simpler workstation with 2 chairs side by side. "We can work together now," she explained, her small face serious. "2 minds are better than 1. As Michael moved his remaining financial texts to make room for Emma's growing book collection, he discovered a box he had forgotten, photographs and mementos he had saved during the darkest days of his downfall. Among them, a picture of his parents outside their modest bakery in Boston, taken long before his rise to wealth and prominence. "Are those your mum and dad?" Emma asked, peering over his shoulder. "Yes. They worked incredibly hard so I could go to college." He ran a finger over their smiling faces. "They never lived to see how high I climbed or how far I fell." Emma studied the photograph. "They look kind. I think they'd be happy with us." The simple observation brought unexpected tears to Michael's eyes. By Sunday evening, the apartment was transformed. Emma's room glowed with warm yellow walls adorned with mathematical diagrams she had drawn herself. The living room, once a study in corporate grey, now featured a vibrant blue wall and colourful throw pillows. Most importantly, they had converted Michael's rarely used dining room into a dedicated learning space with bookshelves covering the walls and a large whiteboard for Emma's equations. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Michael sat in the newly painted living room, drinking tea instead of whiskey. The apartment no longer felt like a monument to his failure, but a canvas for something new. For the first time in over a year, he felt genuinely at peace. His contemplation was interrupted by a soft sound from Emma's room. Silently opening her door, he found her fast asleep amid a sea of open books. Not children's stories, but university-level texts on advanced mathematics, theoretical physics, and computer science. Her small hand still held a pencil, and beside her lay pages filled with complex equations, many annotated with her own insights. Carefully, so as not to wake her, Michael gathered the books. One caught his attention, a university-level text on algorithmic finance. In the margins, Emma had rewritten entire theorems, simplifying and improving the published work of seasoned mathematicians. Michael sat on the edge of her bed, watching his extraordinary daughter sleep, her brilliant mind temporarily at rest. The child who had been selling origami on the street just months ago was casually redefining mathematical principles that had earned others Nobel Prizes. As he gently removed the pencil from her grasp and pulled the covers over her shoulders, an idea began to form in Michael's mind. His financial empire may have crumbled, but perhaps he had been given a second chance to create something far more valuable, a legacy not of wealth, but of genuine innovation and human potential. He placed a soft kiss on Emma's forehead. "Sleep well, my little genius," he whispered. "Tomorrow we start something remarkable." That night, Michael Thompson slept soundly for the first time since his downfall. His dreams no longer haunted by what he had lost, but illuminated by what they might build together. The call from Emma's school came on a Tuesday afternoon. Michael answered immediately, concerned. Mr. Thompson, this is Principal Martinez. Don't worry, Emma isn't in trouble, but we need you to come in as soon as possible. An hour later, Michael sat in a conference room surrounded by educators whose expressions ranged from admiration to bewilderment. At the center of the table lay Emma's test results and work samples. We administered every advanced assessment available, Principal Martinez explained, sliding a folder toward Michael. The results are unprecedented. Dr. Rodriguez, the district's educational psychologist, leaned forward. Mr. Thompson, your daughter's cognitive abilities, particularly in mathematics and pattern recognition, literally register off our charts. We had to consult university specialists to fully evaluate her work. Michael flipped through the report, his heart swelling with pride but contracting with responsibility. Numbers and percentiles told the extraordinary story of Emma's mind. She's not just gifted, Dr. Rodriguez continued. She's possibly one of the most brilliant mathematical minds in her generation. The way she approaches problems is revolutionary. She doesn't simply solve equations. She reimagines entire systems. Principal Martinez clasped her hands together. Mr. Thompson, we're not equipped to provide the education Emma needs. We'd like to discuss specialized programs, perhaps university courses. Michael nodded, overwhelmed. Thank you. I'll need time to consider our options. Driving home, he found Emma at the kitchen table, homework long finished, now deeply engrossed in an advanced calculus book. How was your meeting? She asked without looking up. Eye-opening, he replied carefully. Emma, why didn't you tell me how advanced your mathematical abilities really are? She shrugged, suddenly looking every bit the 8-year-old child she was. I didn't want to be different, not more than I already am. Being different isn't a bad thing, Michael said gently. It was on the streets. Her voice grew quiet. Standing out gets you noticed. Being noticed isn't always safe. A protective ache gripped Michael's chest. You're safe now, and your mind is a gift, not something to hide. After dinner, while Emma was taking a bath, curiosity led Michael to her room. With newfound understanding, he searched for clues to the full extent of her abilities. Under her bed, he discovered a cache of notebooks filled with equations, algorithms, and theoretical models far beyond anything he had expected. One notebook particularly caught his attention. Dated entries chronicling mathematical patterns Emma had observed while living on the streets. She had developed complex formulas predicting pedestrian traffic flow at different times of day, weather conditions that optimized sales, and even algorithms calculating the most efficient locations for selling her origami. What had seemed like a child's desperate struggle for survival had actually been a genius applying advanced mathematics to the harsh realities of street life. When Emma emerged in her pajamas, she found Michael sitting on her bed, notebooks spread around him. You weren't supposed to see those, she whispered, hugging herself. Emma, Michael said, his voice thick with emotion, these are extraordinary. They're just numbers, she said, eyes downcast. Just ways to make sense of things. Michael held up a notebook containing pedestrian traffic patterns. This isn't just numbers. This is brilliant applied mathematics. You weren't just surviving by chance. She sat beside him, small fingers tracing the equations she had created. People are predictable if you watch long enough. I calculated when the most generous people would pass by, which corners had optimal visibility but minimal police presence. What times had the highest foot traffic but lowest vendor competition? You created predictive models that Fortune 500 companies would pay millions for, and you did it to sell paper foxes. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. The fox algorithm was particularly effective. Michael put an arm around her shoulders. All this time I thought I was saving you, but your mind was already saving you in ways I could never have imagined. That night, long after Emma had fallen asleep, Michael sat in the newly painted living room, a remarkable realization dawning. In the midst of losing everything he had once valued, he had gained something priceless. Not just a daughter to love, but a mind that could change the world. The real treasure, he now understood, had been hiding in plain sight. selling origami on a rainy Chicago corner. If you're getting as emotional about this story as I am telling it, share this video with someone who needs to believe in the power of second chances. And stay tuned, because the discovery Emma is about to make will leave everyone speechless. Unable to sleep, Michael wandered through the quiet apartment, his mind racing with possibilities for Emma's education. From the hallway, he noticed a blue light spilling from under the door of their shared workspace. He hesitated, then gently pushed the door open. Emma was hunched over his old computer, her small face illuminated by the screen's glow. Lines of code scrolled rapidly as her fingers danced across the keyboard with practiced precision. "It's past midnight," Michael said softly, making her jump. I couldn't sleep," she stammered, moving to close the program. "Wait," Michael approached, resting a hand on her shoulder. "What are you working on?" Emma bit her lip, conflicted, then sighed. "I've been analyzing something. I wasn't sure if I should tell you." Michael pulled a chair beside her. On the screen, complex financial data flowed through what appeared to be a sophisticated analysis program. "Where did you get this data?" he asked, recognizing fragments of trading patterns. "From public records of Thomson Financial," she explained. "I've been studying the collapse." Michael felt his chest tighten. "Why?" "Because it didn't make sense." Her serious eyes met his. The math wasn't logical. She pointed to the screen where colorful visualization charts displayed trading patterns from the months before his company's implosion. "Look at these patterns. They're not random market fluctuations. They're deliberate." Her finger traced a series of subtle anomalies. "Someone created an algorithm designed to trigger cascading failures in your company's risk management systems." Michael leaned closer, his financial expertise awakening after months of dormancy. What initially appeared as market chaos now revealed itself as something more sinister, digital fingerprints of sabotage. "Harrison," he whispered. Emma nodded. "I think so, but that's not all." She clicked to another screen showing encrypted transactions. "I've been developing an algorithm to trace hidden money flows. These transactions don't make sense unless..." "Unless what?" "Unless they were never intended to disappear completely." Her voice grew excited. "Mr. Thompson, Dad, I think most of the money didn't vanish. It's hidden, waiting." Michael stared at the screen. Decades of financial expertise allowing him to see what Emma had discovered. His downfall hadn't been simple embezzlement. It was an elaborate shell game designed to make assets temporarily disappear, only to resurface when all investigations had concluded. "Harrison didn't just steal the money," Michael said slowly. "He created a timed re-emergence strategy." "Exactly." Emma's eyes sparkled with the thrill of intellectual challenge. "The algorithms are set to reconsolidate the assets in approximately 18 months, long enough for all investigations to close and try to move elsewhere." Michael ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. "How did you figure this out?" "I noticed discrepancies in the collapsed asset valuations. The math didn't balance." She shrugged, as if it were obvious. "Numbers always have to balance." "And you created this tracking program yourself?" She nodded. "I've been working on it at night. It still needs refinement, but it's already identified several hidden transaction pathways." Michael stared at his 8-year-old daughter with a mixture of admiration and growing determination. The universe had a strange sense of irony. His financial empire had been destroyed by one mathematical mind, only to be potentially recovered by another. "Emma," he said carefully, "this is dangerous information. If Harrison realized what you'd discovered..." "I know." Her voice was small but resolute. "But isn't the truth important? You taught me that." Michael looked at the screen again, seeing not just the technical brilliance of Emma's discovery, but its moral significance. This wasn't just about recovering wealth. It was about justice for thousands of employees and investors who had lost everything. "We're going to need help," he said finally, "and we're going to need to be extremely careful." Emma's face broke into a tentative smile. "So, we're going to do something about it." Michael nodded, a forgotten fire reigniting in his soul. "Yes, together, As dawn broke over New York, father and daughter remained huddled before the computer, their shadows stretched long across the room, two minds united by mathematics, justice, and the unexpected bond that had transformed them both. Now the story is getting really interesting. An 8-year-old girl discovered what professional investigators couldn't. If you're eager to know how they'll use this discovery to confront Harrison, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. What happens next will leave you breathless. A familiar electricity filled the air in the Thompson apartment. The storage closet, once filled with forgotten financial memorabilia, had been transformed into a makeshift operations center. 3 large whiteboards lined the walls, covered with complex diagrams, timelines, and code segments. A secure server hummed in the corner, running Emma's tracking algorithms day and night. They had given their mission a name: Project Phoenix. Like the mythical bird, they intended to resurrect justice from the ashes of deception. "We need more processing power," Emma announced one morning. Her hair twisted into messy braids as she studied the latest algorithm outputs. "The pattern recognition module keeps overloading when tracking the offshore transfers." Michael nodded, making a note. "I'll see what I can arrange, but we also need human insight. Someone who understands the technical infrastructure Harrison uses." That afternoon, while Emma attended her newly arranged university-level mathematics course, Michael visited a small tech consulting firm in downtown Manhattan. Sarah Martinez had been the lead systems architect at Thomson Financial before the collapse. Unlike many executives, she had refused Harrison's generous offer to join his new venture. "Michael Thompson," she said, rising from behind her modest desk. "I never expected to see you again." "Hello, Sarah," he replied, noting the weariness in her eyes. "I need your expertise." Unofficially, Sarah's office blinds were drawn as Michael carefully explained what Emma had discovered. He omitted certain details, including the full extent of his daughter's genius, but shared enough to convey the gravity of their findings. So an 8-year-old girl decoded what teams of federal investigators couldn't. Sarah sounded skeptical. "She sees patterns others miss," Michael said simply. "But we need someone who understands the systems from the inside." Sarah studied the data samples he had brought. Her expression shifted from doubt to focused concentration. "These transaction signatures," she murmured. "They're using a modified version of the security protocol I developed before I left." She looked up sharply. "I always thought the collapse was too clean, too complete. Harrison isn't just brilliant. He's meticulous. He'd never leave loose ends." "Unless the loose ends were part of the design," Michael suggested. "A perfect crime with a delayed conclusion." By evening, Sarah had agreed to join Project Phoenix, bringing critical technical expertise and, equally important, a passionate desire for justice. The team now comprised 3: Michael with his financial acumen, Sarah with her systems knowledge, and Emma with her extraordinary mathematical insight. Days turned into weeks as they worked to unravel Harrison's scheme. The apartment buzzed with purpose. Michael found himself energized in a way that not even his most successful trading days had matched. This wasn't about wealth accumulation. It was about righting a profound wrong. One night, while organizing newly discovered transaction pathways, Emma grew suddenly quiet. "What is it?" Michael asked, recognizing her thoughtful expression. "If we succeed," she said slowly, "what happens to all those people who lost everything?" Michael paused, considering her question carefully. In their focused pursuit of exposing Harrison, he hadn't fully contemplated the consequences. Ideally, the assets would be returned to investors and former employees, he explained, but the legal process would be complex. Emma's fingers tapped a rhythmic pattern on the table, something she often did while thinking deeply. "What if we could do more than just expose the fraud?" she suggested. "What if we could create a system that prevents this from happening to others?" Sarah looked up from her computer. "What are you thinking, Emma?" "The algorithm I'm developing doesn't just track hidden assets," she explained, animation growing in her voice. It identifies the mathematical signatures of fraudulent transactions before they can cause systemic damage. With refinement, it could become a financial immune system. Michael and Sarah exchanged glances, recognizing the potential magnitude of what Emma was proposing. That would transform financial security globally, Sarah said. But Harrison won't go down without a fight. If he realizes what we're doing, he'll try to stop us. Michael nodded grimly. That's why we need to be prepared for every contingency. That night, they established rigorous security protocols. All digital communications were encrypted. Physical evidence was stored in multiple secure locations. Most importantly, they developed emergency separation procedures in case they were discovered. As Michael tucked Emma into bed later than usual due to the intensive work, he felt a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you sure you want to continue with this?" he asked softly. "It's not too late to step back and let the authorities handle it." Emma looked at him, her young face solemn. "The streets taught me something important," she said. "Justice doesn't just happen. People make it happen." She squeezed his hand. "We can make it happen." Michael felt a surge of emotion. In less than a year, his life had transformed from despair to purpose, from isolation to family. Whatever dangers lay ahead, they would face them together. As he closed her bedroom door, his phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca Collins, the social worker who had helped with Emma's adoption. "Need to discuss urgent matter about E. Can we meet tomorrow?" Michael frowned at the unexpected message. Throughout the operation, they had maintained normal appearances. Rebecca's regular visits had continued without incident. What urgent matter could have arisen? Little did he know that Project Phoenix was about to face its first serious threat. The tension is building, and it seems someone has discovered what they're doing. Do you think Rebecca is being honest? Or is there something more behind this? Leave your theories in the comments. The coffee shop Michael chose for his meeting with Rebecca Collins overlooked Central Park, offering both privacy and public security. He arrived early, selecting a corner table with clear view of all entrances, a precaution that had become second nature since beginning Project Phoenix. Rebecca arrived precisely on time, her usual professional composure slightly frayed. Her hair was pulled back severely, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, settling into her chair and declining a menu. "How is Emma adjusting to the advanced courses?" Michael maintained a pleasant expression while mentally noting Rebecca's unusual direct questioning about Emma's academic specifics, information he had deliberately kept vague in his regular reports. "She's thriving," he replied carefully. "What's this urgent matter you mentioned?" Rebecca's fingers drummed nervously on her coffee cup. "I've received some concerns about Emma's living environment. Apparently there are issues about unusual activities in your home." A chill ran through Michael. "What kind of activities?" "Electronic equipment, irregular hours, frequent visitor, a Ms. Martinez." Rebecca leaned forward. "Michael, if you're involved in something that could compromise Emma's welfare..." Home life is perfectly appropriate," Michael interrupted firmly. "Sarah Martinez is tutoring Emma in computer science. The equipment is for her education." Rebecca studied him for a long moment. "I believe you, but I need to conduct an unscheduled home visit today, if possible." Something in her tone triggered Michael's internal alarms, honed through decades of high-stakes negotiations. Rebecca's request wasn't standard protocol, especially for a case that had been progressing smoothly for months. "Of course," he agreed pleasantly, "but I'll need to rearrange my afternoon schedule. Would tomorrow morning work?" Looking relieved, Rebecca nodded. First thing in the morning. When they parted, Michael immediately called Sarah. "We need to secure everything now." Within an hour, Michael and Sarah had moved all sensitive Project Phoenix materials to Sarah's office. Emma, returning from her university class, quickly grasped the situation. "She's working for him, isn't she?" Emma asked, her insight surprising the adults. "We don't know that," Michael said, though his instincts suggested otherwise. That night, While Emma worked on homework in her room, Michael activated the small security system they had recently installed. A discreet camera showed Rebecca Collins approaching his building 12 hours before her scheduled visit. "I knew it," Sarah whispered as they watched Rebecca skillfully pick the lock to his apartment. On the security footage, they observed Rebecca systematically searching the apartment, photographing documents and placing what appeared to be surveillance devices in strategic locations. When she entered Emma's room, Michael tensed, but she merely glanced at the sleeping child before continuing her search. "She's thorough," Sarah noted grimly. "Professional." Michael nodded, a plan already forming. "Let's go back. I want to welcome our unexpected visitor personally." Rebecca's face drained of all color when she emerged from the hallway to find Michael calmly seated in the living room, waiting. "Working late, Rebecca?" he asked quietly. "Michael, I was worried after our conversation and decided to save time. The cameras captured everything." His voice remained controlled. Her composure crumbled instantly. "He forced me to do it," she whispered, sinking into a chair. "Harrison has evidence that could destroy my career, documentation errors I made years ago. He threatened to expose me unless I helped him." "Helped him do what exactly?" "Monitor you," she admitted. "At first, it was just regular reports, but recently he became obsessed with Emma, especially after the charity dinner incident. He keeps asking about her mathematical abilities, her routines, her schoolwork." Michael felt cold dread settle in his stomach. "And what did you tell him?" "Only what anyone could observe," Rebecca insisted. "But he knows you're working on something. He's convinced the girl knows something that could threaten him." Michael moved closer, his voice dangerously low. "And does he understand what happens to people who threaten my daughter?" Rebecca looked away. "You don't understand. Victor Harrison isn't just wealthy. He has connections. Powerful people protect him." Her eyes met Michael's. "Do you honestly think he'd allow a street child to destroy his empire?" From the hallway came a small voice. "I'm not just a street child anymore." Emma stood in her pajamas, her expression far older than her years. "I have a family now, and we're going to stop him." Rebecca looked between them, genuine regret crossing her features. "I'm sorry. I truly supported your adoption of Emma. That wasn't fake, but everything since then has been lies," Michael said flatly. "Leave and take your surveillance devices with you." After Rebecca left, Michael found Emma in their workspace, already rebooting her secure systems on her laptop. "We need to accelerate our timeline," she said without looking up. "Harrison knows we're after him." Michael marveled at her composure. "Aren't you afraid?" Emma finally paused, her small fingers resting on the keyboard. "I lived on New York streets through winters, Dad. I learned that fear doesn't help. Planning helps." Her eyes, wise beyond her years, met his. "So let's plan." That night, they made 3 critical decisions: relocate their operations completely to Sarah's secure office, develop contingency scenarios for various threats, and most importantly, shift from defense to offense. "Rebecca's betrayal changes everything," Michael told Sarah through their encrypted line. "Harrison now knows about Emma's abilities and our investigation. Our only advantage is that he doesn't know exactly what we've discovered or how far we've gotten. So we use that," Sarah replied. "Classic misdirection while we complete the algorithm." When Michael finally fell into troubled sleep that night, Emma's words echoed in his mind. "I'm not just a street child anymore." Indeed, she wasn't. She was his daughter, a mathematical prodigy, and possibly the only person in the world capable of bringing down Victor Harrison's corrupt empire. And that made her very, very dangerous to a man with everything to lose. The sharp sound of splintering wood woke Michael at 3:17 a.m. Years of corporate crisis management kicked in. He was out of bed, grabbing Emma from her room and moving toward their emergency exit before he was fully conscious. "Dad," Emma murmured sleepily. "Code Phoenix." He whispered the phrase they had established for their evacuation protocol. Instantly she was alert, reaching for the pre-packed backpack beside her bed. Heavy footsteps echoed through the apartment as they escaped through the service door to the building's back stairwell. Michael's phone vibrated with an automated security alert. His front door had been breached by what the system classified as forced entry, multiple subjects. "Sarah's waiting 3 blocks south," Michael whispered as they descended the stairs. "Remember the plan?" Emma nodded, her small face solemn in the dim emergency lighting. Contingency 4. The night air hit them with bracing cold as they emerged in the alley behind their building. Michael led them through a practiced route of side streets, constantly checking for pursuit. Finally, they reached the designated meeting point, where Sarah's modest sedan idled with headlights off. "They found us faster than expected," Sarah said as they slipped into the back seat. "The surveillance devices must have had remote activation capabilities." Michael nodded grimly. "Implement separation protocol." Sarah looked at him sharply. "Are you sure? We have no choice. Emma's safety comes first." The pre-arranged safe house was a small apartment above a family-owned bookstore in an unassuming neighborhood. As dawn broke, Michael helped Emma unpack essentials while Sarah secured the perimeter. "How long do we need to stay separated?" Emma asked, her voice steady despite the night's events. "Not long," Michael promised, though uncertainty gnawed at him. "I'll draw their attention while you and Sarah complete the algorithm. It's safer if they focus on me." Emma's eyes, too perceptive for her age, searched his face. "You're not telling me everything." Michael sighed, kneeling to her level. "My blood pressure has been spiking again. The doctor warned that another crisis could be dangerous. I need to know you're safe, especially if—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Emma threw her arms around his neck. "You have to take your medicine." "Promise me!" "I promise," he whispered, holding her tight. The separation was harder than he had anticipated. Michael established himself in a conspicuous downtown hotel, making calculated appearances that would draw Harrison's surveillance away from Emma. Meanwhile, she remained with Sarah, working tirelessly on the algorithm while continuing her education remotely. They maintained communication through an ingenious system Emma had created, math problems posted on a forum for young prodigies that contained embedded messages decipherable only to someone with their specific shared knowledge. 2 weeks into the separation, the pressure finally broke Michael's tenuous health. During a meeting with a financial journalist, part of his diversionary strategy, crushing chest pain brought him to his knees. He woke up in the cardiac unit of New York General Hospital, monitors beeping steadily around him, his first conscious thought being about Emma. Had their communication system been compromised by his hospitalization? Would she think he had abandoned their plan? With trembling hands, he reached for the hospital tablet, accessing the math forum. There he found a new problem posted under Emma's pseudonym, a complex equation that, when properly decoded, read, "We are safe. Algorithm at 87%. Don't worry about us. Focus on recovery." Tears stung his eyes. Even separated, her brilliant mind remained connected to his. From his hospital bed, Michael watched 2 men in dark suits maintaining discreet surveillance of his room. Harrison's watch hadn't diminished with his health crisis. If anything, it had intensified. Good. That meant Emma remained undetected. As days passed, Michael used his confinement productively, reaching out to former colleagues who had been similarly destroyed by Harrison's schemes. By week's end, he had assembled a network of witnesses willing to testify once they had concrete evidence. In the quiet of night, when nurses made their rounds less frequently, Michael would decode Emma's latest forum messages. The algorithm was nearing completion. Soon they would have irrefutable evidence of Harrison's fraud and the means to prevent similar schemes in the future. "Almost there, Emma," he whispered to the darkness. "Stay safe just a little longer." Released from the hospital with strict orders to minimize stress, advice his cardiologist delivered with ironic timing, Michael proceeded with the next phase of their plan. 3 weeks of separation from Emma had been necessary, but painful. Their reunion, carefully orchestrated at Sarah's office after business hours, was brief but emotional. "You look terrible," Emma observed bluntly, her small hands checking his face as if assessing a mathematical problem. "Hospital food," Michael replied with a weak smile, though the real culprit was constant anxiety about her safety. Sarah spread documents across the conference table. Emma's algorithm is complete. It's not just effective, it's revolutionary. Emma beamed with quiet pride. It can trace the hidden assets with 94% accuracy and identify the original fraud patterns retroactively, which means we can prove what happened, Michael said, flipping through the technical specifications. But proof isn't enough. We need to force Harrison's hand. The strategy they devised was audacious. Michael would return to the financial world publicly, using the cover of a consulting position at a small but respected firm. His presence would make Harrison nervous. His actions would make him reckless. 2 days later, Michael entered the New York Financial Center for the first time since his downfall. Whispers followed him through the lobby. The ghost of a disgraced titan returned to haunt familiar halls. He received exactly the reaction they had anticipated. Within hours, Harrison's surveillance team doubled. "He's watching," Michael confirmed that night during their secure call. "Now let's give him something to see." The annual investment strategy conference provided the perfect stage. As a last-minute replacement speaker, Michael delivered a presentation on detecting algorithmic market manipulation, never specifically mentioning Harrison, but with examples veiled enough to send a clear message. Sitting in the back of the hall, Victor Harrison watched with an expression of calculated indifference that failed to mask his tension. When the moderator opened the floor for questions, he approached the microphone. "Fascinating theories, Thompson," Harrison said, his voice carrying through the hall. "But isn't this a case of sour grapes? Failed executives often blame manipulation for their own incompetence." Michael smiled calmly, having anticipated the confrontation. "Perhaps, but mathematics doesn't lie. When asset devaluation follows non-random patterns consistent with programmed interventions, coincidence becomes conspiracy." He projected a simplified version of Emma's analysis, enough to demonstrate suspicious patterns without revealing their complete findings. Around the room, financial experts leaned forward, recognizing the implications. Harrison's composure slipped momentarily. "You've been busy during your sabbatical. I've had time to examine things from a new perspective," Michael replied evenly. "Children often see patterns that adults miss." The reference to Emma was deliberate, a message only Harrison would fully understand. When the session ended, Harrison cornered Michael near the exit. "Whatever you think you've discovered needs to remain theoretical," he warned, his voice low. "For everyone's good." Michael met his gaze steadily. "Theoretical like your concern for our investors, or theoretical like your offshore accounts?" Harrison's eyes narrowed. "Half," he hissed. "I'll transfer half of the recoverable assets to a foundation of your choice. No questions, no prosecution." "That's a generous theoretical offer." "Don't be a fool, Thompson. You have no idea who you're really fighting." Harrison glanced around before continuing. "I can have papers prepared tomorrow. 50% is better than nothing, which is what you'll have if you continue this crusade." The trap was set. With Harrison now scrambling to move assets, Emma's algorithm tracked every transaction perfectly, capturing irrefutable evidence of both the original fraud and the current attempted cover-up. That night, in their secure communication, Michael reported the confrontation. "He offered half," he explained. "Tried to make it sound generous. That's approximately $4. $7 billion, Emma calculated immediately. "But it's not about the money, is it?" "No," Michael agreed. "It's about justice and honoring a promise I made to a little girl selling origami on a rainy day." Emma's response came in the form of a complex equation that, when solved, revealed a simple message. "I believe in you, Dad." As Michael prepared for bed, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Half is generous. The alternative is devastating. Last chance." The game had entered its final dangerous phase. In the pre-dawn silence of Sarah's office, 3 exhausted figures huddled around a conference table covered with evidence of Victor Harrison's elaborate fraud. After weeks of separation, the complete team had reunited to prepare for what could be their final decisive move. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," Sarah said, pushing her glasses up her nose. Harrison offered to quietly return half of the stolen assets, approximately $7 billion, without prosecution, no publicity, no admission of wrongdoing. That's the offer, Michael confirmed, watching Emma as she methodically organized printouts of transaction records. Despite the late hour, her focus remained unwavering. We could accept, Sarah pointed out pragmatically. Take the money, establish the foundation you discussed, help thousands of people, walk away safely. Michael nodded slowly. Yes, that's one option. But it's not justice, Emma interjected without looking up from her work. The other half would still represent thousands of damaged lives, people who lost homes, savings, retirements. She finally raised her eyes to meet her father's, and Harrison would remain free to do this again. There's also the question of your algorithm, Sarah added. Emma, what you've created goes far beyond tracking Harrison's fraud. It could fundamentally transform financial security worldwide. The room fell silent as the weight of their decisions settled around them. The deal offered would solve their immediate problems. Michael and Emma could live comfortably, fund educational initiatives, and avoid the dangerous confrontation that loomed ahead. But the alternative, full exposure, brought risks along with its potential rewards. Harrison's threat of devastating consequences wasn't empty rhetoric. He had powerful allies who had benefited from his schemes. Going public meant facing not just legal challenges, but potentially physical danger. I need to speak with Emma alone, Michael said finally. When Sarah had left, he sat beside his daughter, taking her small hands in his. Emma, I want you to know something important. Whatever decision we make, I'm already immensely proud of what you've accomplished. Your brilliance, your courage, your moral clarity, they humble me daily. She squeezed his hands. But you're worried about what happens if we refuse his offer. Yes, he admitted. Harrison has resources we don't fully understand. The risks are real. Emma considered this thoughtfully. On the streets, I had to make choices every day. Where to sleep, who to trust, when to hide. The hardest lesson wasn't about survival. What was it about? About keeping who you are while surviving. Her eyes, reflecting wisdom beyond her years, remained steady. Anyone can survive if they're willing to become something they're not. The real challenge is surviving with your soul intact. Michael felt emotion tighten his throat. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, she replied with a small smile. A man who could have walked past a little girl selling origami, but chose to see her instead. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, the decision crystallizing between them without further words. When Sarah returned, their path was clear. We go public, Michael announced. Full disclosure, complete evidence, no deals. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. I figured as much. But there's something else we need to consider. She opened her laptop, displaying a complex analysis of Emma's algorithm. This isn't just a tool for exposing Harrison. With proper development, it could become a financial safeguard, an early warning system against similar frauds worldwide. Emma leaned forward, animation lighting her tired eyes. You mean implemented as an open-source protocol for regulatory agencies? Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Instead of just punishing one criminal, we could protect millions of future victims. The implications were staggering. What had begun as a personal quest for justice had evolved into something with potentially global impact. Emma's mathematical genius, born from street survival and nurtured through her bond with Michael, could transform the very foundation of financial security. That would be a real legacy, Michael said softly. Better than buildings with your name on them? Emma asked, a hint of teasing in her voice. He smiled, remembering his former obsession with etching the Thompson name across New York's skyline. Infinitely better. As dawn broke over the city, they finalized their strategy. The evidence would be presented simultaneously to federal regulators, key journalists, and international financial oversight committees. Emma's algorithm would be offered as an open-source solution, with appropriate safeguards to prevent its misuse. The foundation they had discussed would still be established, but with a different purpose: supporting financial literacy and providing resources for fraud victims, particularly those without voices in the system. "There's no going back once we do this," Michael warned as they prepared to leave. "Harrison will use every resource to discredit us." "I know," Emma replied calmly. "But on the streets, I learned another important lesson." She zipped up her backpack filled with evidence, her expression resolute. "The scariest threats come from people who don't want you to realize your own power." As they walked together into the brightening day, Michael reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, he had been a broken man, his identity shattered along with his fortune. Now, with less material wealth but infinitely greater purpose, he faced the greatest challenge of his career, alongside the greatest gift of his life, a daughter whose brilliant mind was matched only by her courageous heart. Whatever storms awaited them, they would face them together. The Securities and Exchange Commission office in New York wasn't accustomed to receiving visits from disgraced former CEOs accompanied by 8-year-old girls. Yet, on a crisp Monday morning, that was exactly who arrived at their door. "We have an appointment with Director Williams," Michael stated calmly to the security guard, who looked dubiously between Michael's worn but dignified suit and Emma's impeccable school uniform. "Thompson and Thompson," the guard confirmed, eyebrows raised. "Father and daughter," Michael affirmed, his hand resting protectively on Emma's shoulder. Director Eleanor Williams greeted them with professional courtesy, masking obvious curiosity. A veteran regulator with 30 years of experience, she had investigated hundreds of financial crimes, including the initial and ultimately inconclusive review of Thompson Financial's collapse. "Mr. Thompson, I must admit your request for this meeting was unusual," she began once they were seated in her office. "What we're about to share is equally unusual," Michael replied, nodding to Emma, who opened her laptop. For the next 2 hours, they methodically presented their evidence: transaction records, algorithmic analyses, pattern identifications, and comprehensive timelines. Emma explained the mathematical signatures of fraud with a clarity that left even experienced financial investigators leaning forward in fascination. "This is remarkable," Director Williams finally said, removing her glasses to rub her eyes. "If verified, this represents one of the most sophisticated financial crimes we've ever documented." "It is verified," Emma assured her confidently. "Mathematical certainty is 98.7%. Simultaneously across town, Sarah Martinez presented the same evidence to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, while digital packages were delivered to selected journalists at major financial publications. By afternoon, the wheels of justice were undeniably in motion. Federal agents executed search warrants at Harrison Capital headquarters. Related securities trading was temporarily suspended. Victor Harrison's name flashed across financial news tickers worldwide. Michael and Emma watched the developments from the safety of a temporary location arranged by federal authorities. As predicted, Harrison's counterattack was swift and vicious. "Former Thompson Financial CEO launches desperate smear campaign," read one headline on a business news site controlled by Harrison's media allies. Another questioned Emma's existence, suggesting she was a PR invention designed to humanize a failed executive. "They're saying I'm not real," Emma observed, reading the articles on her tablet with analytical detachment. "That's actually a fascinating strategy." Michael smiled despite his concern. "How so?" "It indicates they can't attack the mathematics itself," she explained. "If they could refute our evidence, they would. Instead, they're trying to discredit the source." By evening, the story had evolved beyond Harrison's ability to control. Financial analysts worldwide began examining the publicly released portions of Emma's algorithm, confirming its validity. Statements from former Thompson Financial employees corroborated the timeline of suspicious activities preceding the company's collapse. Most damaging to Harrison, international banking authorities had frozen suspect accounts identified by Emma's program, capturing billions in assets before they could be moved again. The next morning, Michael received a call from Walter Stevens, the veteran hedge fund manager who had witnessed Emma's mathematical prowess at the charity dinner. "Thompson, what that child of yours created goes beyond exposing Harrison," Stevens said without preamble. "This algorithm could revolutionize financial security. Half the firms on Wall Street are already analyzing the public components. What's your end game here?" It was the question they had prepared for, the crucial next step in their strategy. "We're establishing the Financial Transparency Initiative," Michael explained. "The complete algorithm will be released as a public resource, with ongoing development supported by a non-profit foundation." "You could make billions patenting this technology," Stevens countered. "We're not interested in profiting from it. The algorithm was created to protect people, not to enrich us." "Wall Street won't understand that logic?" "Then it's time for new logic," Michael replied simply. 3 days later, Michael and Emma took their most public step yet, a carefully arranged interview with respected financial journalist Maria Rodriguez, conducted in their newly secured apartment. "Some are calling this the most significant financial security innovation in decades," Maria began, her camera crew capturing the modest living room where complex equations still covered a whiteboard. "Yet you're offering it to the world for free. Why?" Michael looked to Emma, encouraging her to answer. "Because mathematics doesn't belong to anyone," she explained, her voice clear and confident. "It's a universal language that helps us understand patterns and protect people. Keeping it private would defeat its purpose." "And what would you say to those questioning whether an 8-year-old child could really create such a sophisticated algorithm?" Emma smiled. "I'd invite them to examine the mathematics. Numbers don't care how old you are." When the interview ended, Maria asked the question Michael had expected. "Mr. Thompson, many are curious about who exactly created this remarkable algorithm. You've been careful not to take credit yourself." Michael looked at his daughter with unmistakable pride. "A brilliant mind who taught me that true value isn't measured in dollars. Besides, we prefer to let the work speak for itself." By week's end, federal charges had been filed against Victor Harrison and 6 associates. International financial regulators had implemented preliminary versions of Emma's detection system, already identifying suspicious patterns in 3 unrelated cases. Most significantly, nearly 70% of the stolen assets from Thomson Financial had been located and frozen, with legal proceedings underway to return funds to former investors and employees. That night, as Emma completed her advanced mathematics homework at the kitchen table, Michael received a text from an anonymous number. "This isn't over, Thompson." He deleted it without comment, choosing instead to focus on the remarkable child before him and the extraordinary future they were building together. 1 year later, Michael and Emma stood together on the sidewalk where they had first met. The winter air carried the same chill, but everything else had changed. "Hard to believe it was right here," Emma said, looking at the spot where she had once displayed her origami creations. At 9 years old now, she was a bit taller, her posture reflecting the confidence of a child who knew she was both loved and valued. "Sometimes the most important moments happen in the most ordinary places," Michael replied, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Behind them rose the newly established headquarters of the Thomson Foundation for Educational Innovation. Funded with a portion of the recovered assets from Harrison's fraud, the foundation had already launched programs for mathematically gifted children from disadvantaged backgrounds, providing opportunities that would never have existed otherwise. Victor Harrison was serving the first year of a 15-year sentence for securities fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. His empire had crumbled, but more importantly, the financial safeguards developed from Emma's algorithm had been implemented in markets worldwide, already preventing 3 major fraud attempts. "You could have just given me a sandwich that day and kept walking," Emma observed as they made their way back to the foundation building. "Most people would have done that." Michael smiled, remembering the broken man he had been, isolated, bitter, defined by his losses. "I thought I was saving you," he said softly. "I never realized you would save me." The Foundation's lobby featured a simple display case. Inside, carefully preserved, was the first origami fox Emma had sold him, alongside a framed printout of the first line of code from her revolutionary algorithm. Below them, a small plaque read, "Extraordinary solutions often come from unexpected places." In Emma's new advanced mathematics class at the university, professors who had initially been skeptical about a child prodigy now regularly sought her insights. The academic papers they were co-authoring promised to transform not just financial security, but computational approaches to pattern recognition across multiple fields. "Dad," Emma said as they entered their office overlooking the New York skyline, "do you ever miss your old life? The money, the power, the buildings with your name on them?" Michael considered the question seriously. "I miss certain comforts," he admitted, "but not the emptiness that came with them, not the person I was becoming." He looked at his daughter, this remarkable child who had transformed his understanding of wealth, success, and purpose. "What we're building now will help people long after we're gone," he continued. "That's a legacy worth having." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I've been working on something new," she said, pulling a notebook from her backpack. "An extension of the algorithm that could help identify children with exceptional mathematical abilities, especially in underserved communities." As she explained her latest innovation, Michael marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From the depths of his failure to the heights of this new purpose, from a little girl's struggle for survival on the streets to a revolutionary mathematical mind changing the world. The real treasure they had both discovered was never in bank accounts or corporate headquarters. It was in the transformation that happens when talent meets opportunity, when purpose replaces ambition, and when two unlikely souls find in each other exactly what they need to become their best selves. And so ends this extraordinary story of second chances, hidden genius, and the transformative power of unconditional love. If this story touched your heart as it touched mine, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to believe that miracles still happen. Leave in the comments which part moved you the most. Until the next inspiring story,